Okay, everybody, welcome to the Real Mike Pittman podcast. And joining me on the show here today is Mr. Robert Blackwell Jr. out of Chicago, Illinois. Robert is the president and the CEO of two companies. One is called Killer Spin, and the other one is EKI. I believe it's a technology consulting company, Robert, and as well as other things that Robert does. And I've known Robert quite a number of years, but we seems like it's been forever since we connected. So, Robert, first of all, thank you for coming on the show and welcome.
Hi, man. Good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about who Robert Blackwell is and give us a little bit of insight into your two companies?
Sure. So I kind of describe myself as an unemployable math misfit. So I was born in Philadelphia, but I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. And luckily for me, I was born to two really good parents with no dough. So my mother was 20 and my father was 23. Really phenomenal people. God bless me with them, but they had no money. So in my house, the rule was you can do whatever you want as long as you follow these three rules. And those rules were something like don't lie, do your homework, and don't make your mother mad. I don't know if I succeeded at any of those, frankly. So I had my first I would say it was the first beginning of a business when I was 5 years old. So I would walk to school and I would go and I would see like recycling bottles. So you could pick up this time Coke bottle, Pepsi bottles, whatever, and you could turn them in for whatever the nickel or dime is. That was the deposit. You had to give a deposit at that time for the glass. So I would go around, pick them up, go get the money. And then when I was 8, I noticed that people would go out for recess and they would go to the candy store. So when they went to the candy store, if you got back late from going to the candy store, the teachers would hit you with these wooden paddles. So I figured that if I went after school and I just bought gum, people would exchange their money. They'd rather give me money if they wanted their candy. They'd rather give me their money than get hit by a teacher. So I bought this stuff called Bub's Daddy. It was these long sticks of gum. I bought them for a nickel and sold them for a dime. And so that was my kind of first real taste of making money. So I liked that. And then in 1973, my family moved to Chicago from Kansas. So I really grew up in Wichita, Kansas. So we came to Chicago, didn't know anything about Chicago. So we were the first Black family to live in Lombard, Illinois, which is one of the western suburbs. And I got a bomb thrown in my house and "nigga go home" written on our lawn. And luckily it was just me and my father. I think it was the summertime, and my mother and sisters and younger brother I think they were either in Wichita or Louisville, where my mother's from. So that happened, and my father said, "Hey man, suck it up, because we're not going anywhere." And I think I was 12 at the time. So it was really difficult because this is the first time really I lived outside a Black world. I mean, I grew up around Black people and I thought my life was pretty good. Moved to Chicago. It's the first time that there was no Black people around me. So I got in fights all the time and there was all kinds of drama. But I had this sneaking suspicion that white people like gum too. So I took that business to school, and sure enough, just like us, they like gum. So I started to sell gum in school. In fact, I was selling so much gum, people stopped buying ice cream. So I had to ended up doing a deal with the vice principal to sell my gum and his ice cream, because people were buying my ice cream and my gum. They didn't have any more money for ice cream. So he had to cut a deal with me. So I always really liked kind of being in control of my own destiny. Since then, I was always trying to figure out how to make money because I never liked people telling me what to do, not even my parents. So, and also I was just a lousy student. My head was in the clouds all the time. And in fact, when I was 12, my mother took me to get tested because she had this sneaking suspicion that I wasn't totally without intelligence. I was trying to prove her wrong, but she thought there was some hope for me. So anyway, I got tested and they gave me this math problem and I came up with a better answer than they had. And I remember when I was 12, I always used to like dream in patterns and things like that. So I kind of came up with my own mathematical theory on patterns and things like that when I was 12. So then I got out of school. I went to studied martial arts for a little while, which gave me some discipline in my life. Went to school, studied math, worked at IBM for a little while. And at that time, IBM, they essentially told you if you were not a salesman, you're a nobody. So I wasn't. I was this little nerdy kid. And I figured out that that wasn't for me, but I didn't want to embarrass my father. So I said, I better do something productive before I leave this place so I don't embarrass my father. So I ended up writing all the algorithms that would give salespeople signals to upgrade machines. So I did that. That got rolled out across the country, and then I left. So I was 23 years old. I think I was 22 or 23 years old. And then I started my own company doing technology consulting, mostly in finance. But like a lot of, let's say, 23-year-olds, I knew more about technology than business. So, but I did kind of well enough to take care of myself and some friends. And then I got into trading. So I ended up being a trader at the Mercantile Exchange, which was a great experience for me. So I did that. And then I ended up funding a company that I had to take over. And that was a company that built financial modeling systems. So then we ended up writing all the financial modeling systems for Sears and Abbott Labs and Mellon Bank and Farmers and a lot of other large companies. Then my father retired from IBM in 92. We had a company together for a couple of years. Then in 95, I started a company called Urban Fishing Development. So I grew up in all Black neighborhoods, and I thought what we needed was economically integrated Black neighborhoods. So there's an area of Chicago called North Kenwood, Oakland. I ended up buying a bunch of land. They started to tear down public housing. I bought a bunch of land, built houses, named them after famous Black people. And that neighborhood is what I envisioned it would be, which is an economically integrated Black neighborhood, and things are better for everybody. In fact, it's the only Black neighborhood in the country that I know of that's better off today than it was in the year 1967. So why I'm glad I did that, I hated construction. So I started EKI-Digital in 1998, which is a technology and analytics consulting company. We help really large organizations really in three areas: architecture, analytics, and automation. And actually last year I fired myself, hired a new CEO. So I'm executive chairman of that company. And so in 2000, I thought the stock market was going to go bad, and Chicago had something called the Ping Pong Festival. And so I decided we were going to sponsor the Ping Pong Festival because we didn't have any relationships in the public sector. So I took $100,000 and we sponsored the Ping Pong Festival. And whenever they asked me to be the chairman, I guess because I was the only one goofy enough to sponsor that. But whenever there were tables out, there were just lines of people to play. So I started getting this entrepreneurial itch. So in late 2001, I decided, I was talking to an intern, and I said, we're going to start a table tennis company. And I did it for two reasons, because while everybody knows table tennis is more commonly known as ping pong, nobody can name the name of a brand. So I said, that's an opportunity. And I also said, Black people don't own anything in sports. So me and my little Mau attitude decided I'm going to start a table tennis company for those reasons. And then we became kind of the leading company in the world in our space. So what Killer Spin does, it creates experiences that connects people to the people that they love and that need their love through break time play. So table tennis is, I say, the sport of family and friends. And it's a break time sport. So that's kind of Killer Spin, and we're kind of the leading company in the world in our niche. EKI-Digital, what we do is we use kind of advanced analytics and automation to help people identify and capture monetizable opportunities. So help you find money in your operations. So that's my little boring story.
Wow, that's remarkable. Entrepreneur at age 5. I guess I was intrigued too by you say you were a home builder. How many homes did you build? Was it pretty much a subdivision, or just got an area where
Well,
it was
what I did was I built, let's see, I built 2 single families, one that I lived in till I sold it. Another set of single family homes that are joined by a wall, a common wall, and I did a conversion of an 8 flat. But I bought a bunch of land, and then I gave the land away to some younger Black developers. I hated construction. I kind of had enough of that.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask you a few questions about EKI. How many employees do you currently, or does EKI currently employ, or do you do business primarily in the Chicago market, or is it pretty much nationwide or worldwide?
Well, there's about 80 people, in the company, and we do work really all over the country. We've done some things outside the country, and we did some work in Bahrain, where I wrote the national digitization strategy for the government of Bahrain. Done a little bit in Nigeria, which was kind of cool, but mostly in the United States.
Man, that is remarkable. I know I've been to your office there in Chicago, and I remember when I walked in the office, I saw this big old ping pong table in there. And I remember, I grew up in St. Louis and used to play a lot of ping pong, so I thought I was pretty good until I picked up that racket, that paddle, and played you, and you gave me a spanking that I'll never forget. And you had so much spin on the ball. I'll never forget that. I remember I swung at the ball, and all I swung at was air because the ball moved about 10 feet away from me. So I'm like, this is remarkable. So, and I could see exactly how you went into Killer Spin. Now, prior to starting Killer Spin, did you play ping pong as a child? Was it something that you
Well,
did, or just
I would say I didn't start the company because I was really passionate about table tennis. I always liked it because I started playing with my father, and in fact, I kind of jokingly say I used to tell everybody that I played table tennis with my father, and that's how I knew that he loved me until he told me really what happened. He said, "Well, listen, man, I got to tell you the truth." He said, "So my father's 23 years older than me. So when I was totally an airhead teenager. So I don't know, 12, 13 years old or something. And, My father's in his mid-30s, focusing on his career. So my mother said to him, "I know you're busy, and I know you're busy and you're focused on your career, but don't forget you have a son, and don't be a bum and spend time with your son." So, not wanting to piss off my mother, he agreed to play table tennis with me.
Wow, that's remarkable. Now I know that Killer Spin, you guys have an international tournament. Is that held there in Chicago?
Well,
The
what we
tournament that you
do
got?
is we've done we've created kind of the largest events ever held in the United States. And what I would say is we redesigned the way that table tennis is presented in the world. Um, but once we do something and it becomes stale, we stop doing it. So we're always trying to reinvent what we're doing. So the next thing for us will be kind of a new launch of Killer Spin next year, focus more on creating experiences and space for team building. It'll be more team building as a service. And the break time play will be one of the aspects of team building as a service.
Hmm. And when you talk about the brand itself and how you've established the brand, have you been approached by any of the, I guess, major sports players in terms of them possibly wanting to buy your company or partner with your company or do certain things like that?
Um, there was some conversations I wasn't really that interested in, frankly. And so it hasn't been a lot of that, but mostly I used uh, Killer Spin as a way to connect me with people. So actually, Barack was the founding lawyer of Killer Spin. He kind of jokes at me when I tell him, "Don't forget, I founded that company." Uh, so we've done events with the Pope and a bunch of other people, and so mostly it's
Did
been
you
a
say
way.
the
I'm sorry.
Pope?
Yeah,
Did you say the Pope?
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, if you Google me and the Pope, you get a picture of me in the Vatican. We gave the Pope a table, his own table.
Oh, oh my goodness. Wow. Does the Pope play? Or do
I
you
don't I
just
don't
kind of
know,
gave him
but we presented it to him in the Vatican, and
uh,
we made 5 copies of the table. I still have a copy of it somewhere, uh, but there are 5 replicas in the world.
wow. Now you mentioned Barack. I know you have a story about him. Can you want to share that in terms of you guys' relationship and how you kind of got started? I know you had shared it with me at one time, but I'd like for our listeners to kind of give the Barack Obama story.
Well, I would say it was 1992, and my father was reading the paper, and he said, "Hey, there's this kid." Of course, because he's my age. He's a kid. He said, "Oh, there's this kid who was the first black editor of the Harvard Law Review. Just moved back to Chicago. Call him up and let's meet him." So I called him and he came to see us. At that time, he would come to see you. Uh, so I came to see him and we became friends. And then when I was doing some real estate stuff, he would do legal work, and we just kind of became friends. And I went on the journey with him uh, from becoming a state senator to a U.S. senator to president, and so I would say we are kind of two skinny black kids that got lucky living
It,
on the south side of Chicago.
it made out okay. You know, I have a Barack Obama story as well. Back when he was running for U.S. Senate, a guy I'm pretty sure you know him, but a lobbyist by the name of Vince Williams
Yep.
called me one day and said, "Hey, Mike, I got somebody I'd like for you to meet. He's a candidate for U.S. Senate." I said, "Well, what's his name?" He said, "His name is Barack Obama." I said, "Who?" He said, "Barack." I said, "That sounds too much like Osama bin Laden." I said, "How's he going to get elected to office with a name like that?" So I said, I tell you what, go ahead and set the meeting up, and I'll meet him and talk to him. So I remember sitting down with him in his office at the time. He was a state senator, and we sat down. We talked for about 2 hours, and he told me a story about his community organizer. He went to Harvard. He was the president of Harvard Law Review. I said, well, let me get this straight. I said, you graduated from Harvard with a law degree. You were the president of the Harvard Law Review. I said, you can go anywhere in the country and probably walk in the door making $1 million a year. I said, why is it that you want to do this? He went on to say, I want to change things. I want to do this. I say, well, he said, well, I don't have anybody downstate at all that's come out for me. And I said, I would really appreciate it if you could help me, is what he said. I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me do a fundraiser for you. We'll put a fundraiser together down here, which we did, and we raised some money for him. He was very, very happy. And I remember he called me 2 days later, and he, was thanking me for the fundraiser. And he said, oh, by the way, I want you to make sure you watch television tonight. I say, well, what's on? He said, I'm going to be on. I say, well, where are you? He said, I'm in Boston giving a speech at the Democratic National Convention. And, after that, it was pretty much, he was a rock star after that. So I haven't talked to him in years. The last time I talked to him was the day he said he was running for president. And after that, haven't had any other conversations with him. It's kind of hard to get in touch with after that. So that's it.
So it's funny in that story. So I was there. I think it was me and Marty Nesbitt were like standing like right in front of him giving that speech. So I was there in Boston when he gave the speech, and I was walking to, I remember I was walking to get in to whatever the stadium was. And this guy came up to me and he said, Senator, you got to take a picture with me. I said, dude, what are you talking about? No, he said, oh, Senator. I said, dude, you got the wrong guy. No, come on, Senator. So, yeah. So I guess drunk white people think all skinny black people look alike. So yeah, that happened a couple of times, even though I knew I look nothing like him. But that was just kind of amazing time, and I was like right there listening to it. So it's funny. I told a friend of mine in 2003 that Barack was going to be president. He said no chance. So what I would say the real thing about the Barack story was, I think before 2003, nobody ever thought we would have a black president. That was like jogging to the moon or something. Nobody ever thought we were going to have a black president. So it was kind of, I would say, almost a religious experience. For me, the deal that him winning the Senate was a much bigger deal than being president. By the time he's running for president, I just kind of knew he was going to be president. There was some doubt on whether he was going to be senator or not, because he had to overcome some adversity. But that was kind of a major, I'd say it was kind of a religious experience for a lot of people. So
yeah, I mean, everything lined up for him. It was I can't remember.
Oh, Brock, listen, Brock is the luckiest man that ever lived, for sure. He's no doubt he's megally talented. He's super talented, but he's also super lucky. I mean, he goes from the guy who put $30 million into his account, turns out to be a wife beater, and then the next guy he's running against, I don't know, is in some strip club with his wife doing stuff, and it's like, man, you can't write this stuff.
Yeah, boy, the cards lined up for him most definitely, and then
they did.
He was off to the races.
And I think the country was ready for him at the time. They were ready to having a black president. For black people was, I think, a very spiritual thing, something that people thought they would never see. And I think for others, it's like, okay, finally, we've moved past race in this country. I think that's what some people thought.
Yeah, and the climate now in the political scene, when you look at all the chaos, with in the political scene, and I look back on his tenure, nobody ever went to jail in his administration, and he ran a pretty clean administration as it relates to individuals, kind of getting their hand in the cookie jar. So I guess kudos to him on that, and I guess he's enjoying his status as ex-president and being able to travel around and go to Martha's Vineyard and probably hang out with guys like you, which is which is pretty nice.
No, listen, the people he hangs out with now has got B's behind their names, dollar signs and B's.
Hey, speaking of that, going back to Killer Spin, isn't that you guys have a tournament? Is it televised? I think it was televised on ESPN or something like that.
Used to be, yeah. So for a long time, we did all the TV for ESPN. The whole cable world has changed now, so we're not doing that. We're not doing that anymore. So, yeah. So we try to do things that are really innovative and novel and move us forward. But if it becomes stagnant or we do it too many times, we just stop doing it.
Yeah. I want to shift a little bit and talk about technology, and specifically to talk about AI in terms of the impact that it's had on the country, on the world, and just to kind of get your thoughts on terms of where do you see AI being 5 years from now? I guess in terms of replacing individuals that do manual things, and just the whole thing with the AI movement in terms of what it can do and the potential that it has. What's your take on that, Robert?
My view is it's just technology. That's it. It is all technology can do is make the work of delivering your services to your stakeholders more efficient. It can't do anything else. Yeah. Every few years, there's some new miracle discovery that is supposed to take people out of their jobs. If you could go back, let's say 150 years, and there was the automobile. If you go back, I don't know, 70 years before that, there were trains. Trains and cars and planes, they're just transportation. That's it. All it does is move people from one place to another place. The technology will advance, but the work is exactly the same. Listen, people long time ago, when they started to write, they wrote on rocks. And then somebody invented the paper, and then the printing press. And then they made books. And then somebody made chalkboards. And then somebody made writing walls. AI, in my view, can't do anything that humans can't do. It's a tool. That's my view of it. It is what I call algorithmic opportunity identification. So the best example of that is in the trading world. So there are no more trading floors. The reason why there are no more trading floors is because all the opportunity identification is algorithmic. Execution is digital, supported by super fast and secure infrastructure. That's what AI is. So if you were to go and let you go to an example, you go to Amazon and it's February in Chicago and you order some slippers. You order some slippers from Amazon. First of all, they know you're in Chicago. They know it's February. You order some slippers. I'm not talking about house slippers. I'm talking about slippers for the beach.
Okay.
The machine says, this man is going on vacation to somewhere warm. What else does he need? Let's offer him some shorts and some t-shirts and some sunscreen and a hat and some glasses. That is essentially AI. It's presenting options to you. So people write the algorithms that present the opportunity for you to act on. So that is called kind of predictive analytics. Prescriptive analytics is a combination of prescriptive analytics. So if it is Tuesday, if you order groceries from Whole Foods like I do, and if I haven't ordered eggs for 2 weeks, they'll send me a signal through Echo or something, some platform. Hey, dude, it's time for you to order eggs. Now, do they absolutely know that I need eggs? Maybe for the last week and a half, I decided I don't want any eggs. They don't know that. However, if I'm ordering eggs on a regular basis and that time period is passed, they say, hey, time for you to order eggs. Do you want eggs? Now, could somebody do that manually? 100%. They could do it. You could have a person who was dedicated to me sitting in Amazon, looking at my buying history, figuring it out, and then picking up the phone and calling me. That's what used to happen in grocery stores a long time ago. Hey, hey, Billy, tell your mother it's time to her to buy some new eggs. That's probably what happened 100 years ago. So none of this is new. It can just happen faster because of technology. So no, I don't think AI is going to listen, some jobs won't be around because of modern technology. There are very few jobs for people. My grandfather was a hatter. Somebody who would make hats and fit hats for people and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Those jobs don't exist anymore. Now, somebody used to put shoes on horses because that was a primary method of transportation in cities. Those jobs don't exist anymore. So the question is, are people poor because are they better off or less well off because those jobs went away? Well, did some people get hurt? Of course they did. If you had worked your whole life as a hatter and all of a sudden people stopped wearing hats, like when John Kennedy stopped wearing hats, then everybody stopped wearing hats. So these things come and they go. Like, think about this cassette tapes, if you're older enough to remember cassette tapes.
Yeah, I still have some.
Okay. The CD, oh, by the way, the cassette track replaced the 8-track, which I'm old enough to remember. So what happened to all the people that worked in the 8-track factories? Did the cassette player take away their jobs? 100%. Well, what happened when the CDs came along and replaced the cassettes? Did people in cassette tape manufacturing plants lose their jobs? Well, of course they did. But did unemployment overall go down or up? No, the country just became more productive, which means if you're working in something, you have to prepare yourselves for the modern parts of the economy. If you're not prepared for the modern parts of the economy, you're going to have difficulty. So the issue is, what are the opportunities in the modern parts of the economy where you can leverage AI? Can it help you write books faster? Can it help you write proposals faster? 100%. I'm a terrible writer. AI just helps me do this much, much faster. I can do in an hour now what it used to take me weeks to do. Weeks and a bunch of people. Now I can be more productive. So no, I don't think people are going to lose their jobs. I think there will be new opportunities for people that will come out of AI. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You gave me some insight on it, and
Okay.
you put a different and no pun intended spin on AI. So I'm just becoming won't say aware of it, but to really see exactly what it can do. And I'm not a techie guy, so for me, it doesn't take a whole lot to impress me as it relates to that. But for someone as yourself, who's been in this arena for a number of years, you definitely look at it with a different set of lens than most people do. And speaking of lens, let's just kind of piggyback a little bit in terms of when we talk about business and business development and individuals that want to go into business. And right now, we're kind of living in a technology age. What, in your opinion, and I know you've done several things throughout your career, what you give for a young entrepreneur that wants to start a business in itself? Well, what would you say the first thing that they should do, or what they should do for that individual that wants to be in business? What advice would you give?
First, figure out what emotional or financial problem you can solve for who better than anybody else in the world that they're willing to pay you more money for than it costs you to deliver it. So that's a long sentence, is to say, in business, you should have, I believe, 3 criteria. Figure out what you have the possibility to be the best in the world at. And that means you've got to be able to solve a big financial or emotional problem for somebody that they're willing to pay you for. Number 2, what are you so passionate about that it's hard for you to sleep? And then number 3, how are you going to make money at it? So business is about delivering value that somebody's willing to pay you for, where they give you more money than it costs you to deliver that product or service. The difference is profit and what you get to pocket. So I think in business, you have to understand really 3 things. One is stakeholder experiences. What are the experiences that you're going to create for the people that put their trust in you? Customers, employees, investors, regulators, those people. Who are your stakeholders? And how do you build trust with them? How do you differentiate yourself from other people? And then number 3 is the next one is lean operations. Taking out waste from cost and protecting yourself against risk. So not wasting money and protecting yourself against costly risk. And the third is thinking about the culture of your organization, because culture spreads both toxins and nutrients throughout an organization. So I would say those 3 things, again, stakeholder experiences, lean operations, and culture is something that you have to master. You also, if you're going to start a business, if you don't know what a income statements, balance sheet, and cash flow statement are, and you don't know how to manage them, don't go into business. It's like you're going into basketball not knowing how to dribble, shoot, and pass. You could be tall and go out on the floor and not know how to dribble, shoot, and pass. You have no chance of being successful at basketball. If you don't understand the 3 fundamentals of business finance, income statement, cash flow, and balance sheet, you have no chance of being successful in business. That's my That's my view.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Yeah. Talking about the dollars in terms of the economy and primarily the African American economy, Black economy, in terms of the amount of dollars that we have go through our hands on an annual basis, which is equal to maybe what's 10th to the 12th largest country in the world, gross national product, but yet we spend over 96, almost 97% of those dollars outside of our community. In your opinion, what would Robert Blackwell do differently in order to address that issue in terms of making our community more aware of the power that they have with their dollars?
well, there is a difference between spending and earning. Black people spend a lot of money. We don't earn much money. It just happens to be that we live in the most prosperous country on earth. So there's lots of opportunity. However, we are at the bottom of the economic barrel in our country. So here's some statistics from the 2010 census. So if you take all the revenues of companies with employees by ethnicity, majority owned companies have been 9.4 trillion, women a trillion, Asians 455 billion, Hispanics 276 billion, and blacks 98 billion. And even that 98 billion is not a real number. It's mostly a fake pass-through number. So the outcomes of this are blacks are the only group that earned less in 2018 than they did in the year 2000. Black boys are the least likely of any group to escape poverty. In fact, 70% of middle-class black kids will likely fall out of the middle class by the time they're adults. Our problem is that we don't participate in the economy in proportion to our talent. So therefore, we're disproportionately poor. Poor people have to live, they have these three bad outcomes: poor health, poor education, and poor financial outcomes. So nowhere in the world are poor people healthy, educated, and safe. And conversely, nowhere in the world are affluent people, regardless of their race, not healthy, educated, and safe. So, how do people go from poverty to prosperity? There's only one way. It is entrepreneurial led economic activity that leads to the appreciation of education and social capital. Social capital is when you reach back and you pull people from your community forward, but more importantly, you create an aspirational roadmap for your people so they know where to place their bets. Our problem is, especially our young men, all they see is entertainment. So therefore, that's where they put their hopes and dreams. Being a basketball player, or being, when that runs out, being a rapper. And when that falls apart, what else do you have to do living in poverty except be involved in non-productive, illicit activity? So our problem is nobody does business with black people in proportion to our talent. So therefore, if we get people to just do business with black people in proportion to our talent, and those people that are ready to deliver value today, and in exchange for that opportunity, they have to reach back and pull other people forward. That is how we're going to fix the mess that we're in. In my view, it's the only way we're going to fix the mess we're in, because charity are the crumbs of other people's success. This is why you'll never see a starving aid worker. They feed themselves before they feed anybody else. That's how life
Man,
works.
that is really deep, Robert. I've never had that broken down to me like that before, and I've talked to all sorts of different individuals as it relates to black and the black economy, but you are the first person that's ever broken it down like that. And I've talked to several Mike. Oh my goodness! As a matter of fact, I just interviewed Mike Roberts right before you came on. I've known Mike for 20, 25 years.
He's from St. Louis too.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Claude Anderson. I mean, just different ones that I've spoken with over the years. And the way you broke that down it really makes a lot of sense. And to see exactly, how can we dig ourselves out of this hole that we've been in, for decades. And then when you look at the fact that, and in your take on this, we have roughly almost 70% of Black households are headed up by single parent mothers. And I know you talked specifically about your dad and how involved he was in your life. How do you see that as an issue
Well,
in
listen,
terms
it
of
is
that?
there's no doubt you will do better if you grow up with a mother and father. Your life will be better. I believe God made men and women, and they do different things. They support children differently. However, when it comes to poverty, there are a lot of people who, I would say on the right, who say all the problems in the world that Black people have are because of single parent households. Well, the question is, again, there's no doubt you will do better if you were raised by a mother and father who are married, living in the same house. But the question as it relates to poverty, crime, and other outcomes, is that causation or is it correlation? So if it was causation anywhere in the world where you had a high degree of out-of-wedlock births, you would also have a high degree of crime and poverty. It turns out not to be the case. Western Europe has out-of-wedlock birth rates that are over 60%, much higher than the United States, about 50% higher than the United States on average. Mexico, Brazil, Nigeria have, I believe, out-of-wedlock birth rates are somewhere between 4 and 10%. So Latin America, the great majority of murders in the world happen in Latin America. Happens to be that is a gigantic concentration of poverty. Poverty is the mother of crime. That was a famous Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, said that. And it is true. So again, why I believe that, look, in the year 1940, 90% of Black households had two-parent households. 90% of Black households had a mother and a father living together. They were married. The year I was born, 1960, it was 80%. The year I got out of high school, it was about 30%. So were Black people poor then? Actually, no, they weren't poor. The issue that we have is, since nobody does business with Black people, look, if every person in Haiti were married, it would not make Haiti an affluent country. They'd still be poor. So again, it's better to be married, but that's not going to solve all. That is not the silver bullet to all your problems. Again, it would be so. I started to think about this when I was thinking about this correlation, because I like to study history, and I kind of like to study the history of crime, actually. So if you go back and you look at people, Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and the famous mafia guys, they all grew up in two-parent households. Did they have lots of crime in those neighborhoods? Of course they did, because they were poor. So there's an interesting thing when it comes to us, which is, Richard Pryor once said, when you go to court looking for justice, that's what you find, just us. So there are a lot of things I would say that apply to us. Sorry here. So when it comes to us, think about when it comes to poor Black communities. Well, what happened is during the Great Migration, Black people migrated from the South to the North, right? If you're in Chicago, your family's most likely from Mississippi. Most Black people in Chicago can trace their grandparents or somebody down to Mississippi. Why? Because in the 1930s, they migrated from the South looking for opportunity and dignity. There were jobs for them. So they worked in the steel plants and things like that. Now, when those jobs went away, the neighborhoods collapsed. So when it comes to us, people say, well, the reason why Black people are having all this trouble is because they're not married and they're lazy and their kids don't go to school and all this kind of stuff. But when that happens to white people, it's a problem of India and China stealing the factories. There's also some kind of reason for us why I wrote this article once called We're the best of us and they are the worst of them. So if you notice when things that criminality is like Black culture, they will say a Black people acting up is Black culture. Nobody says that when white people act up or when other people act up. No, that's criminal behavior. That's not their culture. So what I believe is, in my own view, is Black men, I would say of my generation, have done nothing productive to pull our people forward. We've been leaning on women and living off of what our parents and great-grandparents, our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents did. We're sitting watching our people fall apart, slipping into misery that they may never recover from. So in my own view is that we owe it to those that came before us to do something for those that are going to come after us. And in 2009, I got an opportunity to go to India. I got invited to do a tour of India. And I got to meet with somebody in the central bank. And what they said is that they had decided that they were going to free their economy. The government started doing business with their small entrepreneurs, which prepared them for the international market. And then U.S. business just did business with qualified Asian entrepreneurs. And in a period of 20 years, India and China took 750 million people out of poverty. That's double the population of the United States. During the same period, Black people went deeper into poverty. So all people are trying to save us by giving us charity. So we got this big charity and criminal justice focus. On one hand, the left wants to give us crumbs from other people, and the far right says just lock them up. In my view, Black men have a responsibility to create opportunity and to advocate for our people because nobody else is going to do it. And I think that we have done a terrible job. And I'm talking about my generation. We have done a terrible job advocating for our own people. And I think that if we don't do something better, God's going to punish us for that. Because we live in the most affluent country in the history of mankind. Most of us, like in this country, it's hard not to do okay if you do your best. But we're not doing what other people are doing, which is advocating for our own people in ways that create wealth. I'm not talking about crazy riches, but wealth, so that our people can live in dignity just like everybody else. So anyway, that's my view of the world. Hope that was a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
that was fine. It was interesting. You talked about wealth and I guess the creation of wealth. Uh, in your opinion, do you feel like home ownership is probably the number one way that Black
No,
Americans acquire
no,
wealth?
no.
Hmm.
That is the biggest scam ever.
Hmm.
Home ownership does not create wealth unless the value of your home grows at greater than the rate of inflation, taxes, and maintenance. So let's say that, let's pick any city in, let's just take, say you had bought a house in Carbondale. Say you bought a house in Carbondale in 1965. Would you have made money? Would you be wealthy? Let's take St. Louis, where you're from. Take a Black neighborhood in St. Louis, where you're from. If you had
Okay.
bought a house in a Black neighborhood in St. Louis, let's say your parents had bought a house in St. Louis in 1967, and they gave you the house. Would you be wealthy?
Well, I guess there's several factors that would determine that when you talk about the appreciation of the houses,
If
or if you
if you
talk
had
about,
if you had bought a house in a Black neighborhood in St. Louis, did you grow up in a Black neighborhood?
yeah, I grew up in the projects, so
Okay,
it
great.
really was.
So if you had bought a house in St. Louis in a Black neighborhood in 1968, would you be wealthy today?
No,
No,
unless,
no, unless
unless.
nothing.
Well, what about gentrification though? That raises the value of those
No,
homes, but they're not
no,
Black neighborhoods at that point. Then I guess,
no, no.
right?
I'm sorry. No, this is the fallacy of real estate. Real estate creates wealth for the real estate developer. That's who real estate creates wealth for. If you don't have money, you can't buy or maintain a house. So if you lived in a, let's say you had lived in, let's take Gary, Indiana. I don't know how familiar you are with Gary.
Yeah, I've been there several times.
Okay. If in the 1950s you had lived in Gary, Indiana, Black people migrated up to Chicago to Gary because the steel mills were there. So you could get a job in the steel mill because Gary was a steel town. So if you had a job at the steel mill in Gary and you owned a house, and let's say you had bought it in the 1940s or 1950s, okay, you had income to support the house, to support the grocery stores, to support the maintenance of the roads and everything else, to support the police department. You had income. Now, what happens when all the income goes away because the economic engine went away? What good does the real estate do you?
You
It
raise a
is
very good point.
it is a fallacy that home ownership creates wealth. It creates wealth for banks and the real estate developers and mortgage companies. It doesn't create wealth for a homeowner unless they happen to be in an area where you have a gigantic appreciation in home values. There are a lot of factors, but nowhere in the world, if you are poor, a poor area, do the people get wealthy? No, and this is also the fallacy about real estate development and putting resources, focusing on resources before income. Income pays for real estate. Real estate does not deliver income unless you're a real estate developer.
What about investment property? You feel the same way about it? Those individuals, say if you got 10 houses that you have as an investment property, is the same hold true, would you say?
Okay, if you had bought 10 houses in Gary 20 years ago and there's no income, who's going to pay you the rent?
I guess Section 8, I guess, would be the only other.
It always, somebody has got to have some money. Somebody has to have some money. It's like you can't have a car without income. It's like, hey, should I have an automobile dealership? Yes, you're going to have an automobile dealership if the community that you put that dealership in has some money. Otherwise, you're not going to make money. So it seems to me, I don't know why people don't understand the very basic of economics. You need money to exchange. Look, income, doing work in exchange for money is income you use to pay for the goods and services that you need. Without income, there is no money to pay for goods and services. So wealth comes from participation in the modern parts of the economy that create wealth. So how do we participate in the modern parts of the economy that create wealth? Black people have to advocate for doing business with Black people. And we have to also tell other people, this is what I call the fourth great American movement. The first great American movement was the founding of the Republic, followed by the abolitionist movement, which, by the way, was funded by a Black man who was one of the richest people in the late 1700s in Philadelphia, named James Forten, that nobody knows about, unfortunately. Followed by the civil rights movement. So now we need a movement of people of goodwill dedicated to proving that the free enterprise system works for everybody in proportion to their talent and willingness to work. If we don't do that, we're going to lose the prosperity that we have. And Black people are going to slip into a hole that is unrecoverable. That's my perspective. If you go and you see what happens to Black kids in Brazil, they take Black kids in Brazil, put them under bridges and mow them down with machine guns. That's their solution for Black kids there. So
let me ask you this question as relates to wealth. What role do you think that the Black church can or should play in the creation of wealth for Black Americans?
Okay. Here's my view. God said it is better to give than to receive. So, in my view, we should focus on pulling other people forward by focusing on participating in the economy in proportion to our talent. So, in my view, the role that the Black church could play is one of advocacy for Black people having some money. If you looked at what was the role of the Black church in the civil rights movement, It was an organizing engine, and it gave Black people hope and faith and a place of comfort, but also a sense of direction. Not all churches, but Martin Luther King, that movement was very tied to the church, believing that Black people had a right to live in dignity. So, in my view, a church is not an economic engine. It is a place to gather with people who believe what you believe and to create a community of people that help one another. That's what I think the role of the Black church is. But I don't believe that the church is going to solve the economic problems that Black people have. But it can play a role. That's different in my view than believing in God. God gave all of us talents that we're free to use or to waste. This is just my own personal belief. I believe in the religion of getting up in the morning, taking care of your responsibilities, and helping other people that you're responsible for thrive. I think God put us in this world to leave a legacy. We live in this country. We're lucky to live in this country. We need to make the country better for us and stop begging other people to solve our problems for us, because they're not going to do it. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, you've been spot on all the questions that I've answered. And given in-depth answers at that. So in that regard, Robert, I wanted to say, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to touch on that I didn't talk about? Because I've really enjoyed this conversation.
No, man, listen, it's good to see you, Mike, and you've let me bore you for an hour and 7 minutes now. Look, I would just say this. We live in a great country, but Booker T. Washington said this: America's never going to be what it can be until Black people get included in the economy. He said, we don't need to live around you, but we do have to be a part of the economy. I think we will all be better when Black people participate in the economy in proportion to our talent. That will solve the problem of crime and poverty and bad health and poor education and everything. And we will all be better off for it. So it's my last little 2 cents.
All righty. Well, Robert, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me this evening. It's been very enlightening. You've given me a different perspective on how I look at things. And I think that our listeners and viewers are really going to enjoy this episode. So thank you so much. And if you would hang on just a minute as I end the recording to make sure that you load up. And I just got a couple more things I'll ask you about. So, Robert, thank you.
Sure.
Just hold on one second.
Yep.